What's up, gold miners? Welcome to another episode. This week's guest is the real deal. My good friend, Sujay Mehta. He went from cancer researcher as an undergrad, now owns and manages over 10 hotels worth 9 figures. And he's got a wealth of information he's going to be sharing with all of you, including how to get started in real estate investing, specifically hotel investing. If you have no money to your name, or if you are a working professional and you've got some capital, but really not a lot of time. And later on in the podcast, we get a little bit more tactical. Suj starts talking about hotel operations and things that he is currently doing to optimize operations across his portfolio of hotels. So a little bit of something here for everyone, whether you're just getting started or you have been in hotels for a long time or somewhere in between. There's a little bit of something here for everyone. So guaranteed you will find value in this episode. And if you are not yet subscribed to this podcast or to this YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Click the subscribe button. You will not want to miss future episodes. Lots of golden nuggets and treasure coming your way. But without further ado, everyone, let's roll into this episode. Introducing my badass hotel operator friend, Sujay Mehta. All right. Sujay.
What's up, man?
Welcome to the Gould Mine.
Let's do it. Oh, Gould Mine. I like that.
Yeah.
Man, dang. That's pretty good.
ChatGPT recommended it. It was insane. I can't take credit.
Changing the game. It's funny. I saw someone yesterday asking, they're like first time hotel people and they're like, what do we need to do at check-in? And they asked on one of these forums, and I saw someone post and they're like, just go to ChatGPT and type in, what do we need for check-in? And the whole list popped up. So crazy, changing the game, man.
Dude, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. I saw one of my friends is a school teacher.
Okay.
And was complaining on Facebook saying that all my I can't tell you how many GPT infractions I've had this week. And I'm like, dude, this is the future. We should be encouraged. Why are we resisting the change, right? It's like if I'm in education, it's like I'm going to be like, hey, whoever writes the best ChatGPT article wins. Whoever feeds it the best information to spit out the best article is the winner, because that's what society's going to reward. You know what I mean? So anyways.
No, for sure, man.
Moving on.
Students. I feel like it's like the calculator, right? We're always going to have a calculator. Why do we need to know? Right? So
1,000%. That's kind of what I'm equating it to. Just like, hey, it's the future. It's technology. But anyways, so someone just clicked on this podcast, Sujay. They saw the title. They said, that sounds interesting. Tell me why they should stay. Why should they listen to what we're going to talk about, and what do they stand to gain if they give us their time?
Yeah, first of all, no one's talking about it. That's why, and I guarantee you that's why they clicked on it, because nobody is talking about hotels as a real estate asset class. There's very few people, I should say, in the space that are talking about it, that make you realize that you can invest in hotels, and hotels are a valuable real estate asset. Everyone's talking about multifamily, obviously residential investing, residential home investing has always been a thing. Airbnb's gotten a lot of steam over the past few years, but hotels is a great short-term rental avenue that's been severely overlooked in the past. And so, if you want to know about something that you've been missing, again, it's a piece of gold that no one's seen. So,
piece of gold. And
yeah.
Sorry, that's it. I promise.
I had to.
No, love it, man. Well, you said something just now that reminded me of something I heard you say on one of the podcasts I was listening to, where you mentioned short-term rentals. And that's a huge thing right now, especially in the investing space. A lot of people are talking about it. And you said something interesting, and I was like, wow, it kind of clicked for me in that minute, where you said having a hotel is like having 100 short-term rentals all under one roof.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy, right? Because, what's happened over the last 10 years, I want to say, is there's so many people that enter the short-term rental space, the Airbnb space. I mean, people are turning their single-family homes into Airbnbs. But what's going to happen is those investors who have gotten into that space, 5, 7, 3, 4 years ago, have now amassed a portfolio. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to have 50 Airbnbs in your exact market wherever you are based in, or wherever all your other assets are. It's not feasible or plausible to have neighboring neighborhoods with all these assets. And so as they continue to scale, it's going to become increasingly difficult for them to manage that portfolio. And so either they're going to have to hire a management company, or they're going to have to, maybe liquidate some of those and move into something that is a hotel, or, either a franchise hotel or boutique hotel, but just more units under one roof. And similarly to what, a residential single family owner would do going into multifamily, it's a very similar transition going from short-term rental to the hotel space. So, I definitely think that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of people that have that background, the Airbnb background, going into the hotel space.
Did you have an Airbnb background before you got into hotels?
No. When I started hotels, Airbnb was just kind of becoming a thing. Yeah. I remember one of our early capital partners, they had this huge reservation, investing into the hotel because they're like, Airbnb is completely gonna just eliminate the need for hotels and wipe it out. What's gonna happen? And they were just very hesitant. They still ended up investing and ended up being a great asset. But it was one of those things that was just coming into the space. I had family that was invested in hotels, and so that's kind of how I got into the hotel space. They also did development. They did residential development, that kind of stuff. And so, just naturally, I got into hotel development as one of the first things that I did. And then, slowly from there, as interest rates dropped and that kind of stuff, I got into acquisitions and just grew the portfolio like that. So I never had Airbnb in my background. But with that being said, if there's a great opportunity, we'll always look at it. At the end of the day, we're entrepreneurs, so always got to look for the.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the reason I was asking is because there's a girl in one of my masterminds. Her name's Dia, and she had an extensive Airbnb portfolio before she transitioned into hotels. Yeah, and she had always talked about how easy it was to transition from short term to hotels, because it's literally just taking the same principles that you've learned and then scaling them. Right. Yeah,
absolutely. And what is she going to do? Is she going to exit that portfolio, or is she going to try to keep that and continue to scale?
I have no idea. She's quite the entrepreneur. If you don't follow her, do you know Dia Liu? Have you heard of Dia? And she's I've only observed her from afar, not really spoken one-on-one with her yet, but she's definitely a hustler. So I don't know what she's planning on doing with that, but yeah. But coming back to your journey, because there's a really good transition. You're talking about like getting into development with the family and everything. Like, how does a young guy like you, because dude, like you are super young.
Yeah. Yep.
How does a guy go from published science researcher in oncology journals to owning and managing a nine-figure hotel portfolio?
Yeah, to be honest, the publishing, that was all in undergrad, right? And I think you have a pre-med background as well, and so it was one of those things we had to do, kind of to beef up the resume. And so we did the microbiome research where we pipetting all day, every day, and I'm sure very similar experience for you as well. And it's a pain in the butt. I hated it. Definitely not something that I wanted to do my whole life. But like I said, I was always a science, math person. Growing up, I loved numbers. But I was extremely social, and I loved networking and thinking as an entrepreneur, even as a young kid, I would hustle. I would try to figure out things that I can do. Even growing up, even though I didn't need to, I would still try to figure out, Dad, if we did this, if we refinance this, we could do this. And that was just always what attracted me. I always like to call myself or hope that I can become known as like a deal maker, right? So when I see an opportunity, figuring out a way to make it happen or a way to make it work. And that's kind of always how my mind worked. And so after I graduated, decided I didn't want to do medicine, I went straight into business. And so we opened up some addiction rehab facilities and got into the business world. And then, like I said, always been surrounded with real estate. My dad was an entrepreneur, did a few different businesses. And, so that was always like the atmosphere, the environment, the conversations around the house growing up. Everything would kind of revolve around that. And so going into the medical business space, I realized that it's policies dictate, our NOI, our revenue, everything so much. It's so volatile. As administration changes, everything changes. And, the amount of time and effort that we put in there, I could do something very similar in real estate. And development was just so beautiful. I mean, you look at a piece of land, you look at a lot and you just imagine, I could put, a fast food, restaurant here. I could put a hotel here, create a cool patio here. I mean, this would be awesome. And you just create that in your mind. You let your imagination run and that's it. I mean, you put that on paper and you can make it happen. It was such a beautiful concept to me. And that's why, Bloom Ventures, that's the name of our firm, is because Bloom, like the growth, from nothing comes this like beautiful, rose. And so, that was kind of the whole idea. That's what attracted me to the development side. And so the first deal we did was development. Obviously I had a background in the hotel space. I call them my board of advisors, my father and my uncle, but they've always been there to guide and help and teach along the way. And so that's kind of how it happened. And, once I was in it, anything that I do, I want to say that I would do with 110%. So, once I got into it, I was all in, and, we put in my best foot forward and continue to grow. So one of the beautiful things about hotels is the cash flow, right? So hotels cash flow so well. And so it's very easy to scale. Once you really get your foot in the door, you get a good asset, you run it, you optimize it, you create efficiency, and then you're able to scale from 1 to 2 to 4, and continue going because you have that support of the cash flow. Versus other assets that are maybe a little bit more passive, you can't really multiply like that. So, it seems like this huge, amazing thing, but it's really not, and it's not as difficult as it may seem. So,
I don't know if you're giving yourself enough credit, because a lot of people work hard, Sujay. Yeah. So like a lot of people do the input, but there's not that many that have a 9-figure hotel portfolio. So what would you say have been the key decisions and the actions that the consistent actions that you take that have helped build that? Because it's two parts, right? It's a few key decisions and then consistent actions on top of that. So what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is for us, it's been trusting our numbers, right? And that's something that I always live and die by. I mean, if something doesn't pencil, it doesn't matter how sick it seems or how awesome it would be, to be in this market or to own this asset. But you have to trust your numbers, and that's beginning to end. And so, whenever we're doing a deal, I mean, we'll look at the numbers, we'll underwrite crazy, and we'll make sure that it makes sense. And once we know it makes sense, it's game over. Like we're gonna get that deal one way or another, right? Even if someone else outbids us, I mean, and it's at the end of the day, the other thing that I always lean on is psychology, right? At the end of the day, buyers, sellers, owners, employees, everyone is a human, You treat people like that. You treat people with those kinds of qualities. You treat people like you would want to be treated, and somehow it will create a charm about you, and it will attract people to you. It will attract deals to you. It will attract, people that, even though I'm making a little bit more money selling it to this guy, I want to sell it to him because he's a good person. He'll get it done. We trust him. Whatever it may be, they're not gonna. Maybe it's not just like giving away 50,000 and going with us, even though we have a lower offer, but maybe it's the faith that a pain in the butt for small fees at the end of the day on the closing table on the last day, that kind of stuff, right? And so it's those kinds of conversations and that kind of energy that I feel like has always brought prosperity to us. And I always, it's funny. I was actually talking to someone the other day, and they're like, they were talking to me about, man, stuff's crazy. I don't know what's going to happen, this, that, whatever. And I always think back, and I love to introspect. So one of the things for me is I take a step back and I think, when has it not worked out for us? Like maybe there were hardships, maybe there were struggles, but at the end of the day, it's always kind of figured itself out. And so, why think that now will be different? And I'm a believer that if you work hard, you work honestly, you work smart, it will come, it will happen. Everything will work out. I mean, there's been deals, this might be a good segue, but there's been deals that have been, in the middle of it, I felt like, oh my gosh, this is not going to end well. This is all going to fall apart. This is the beginning of the end. It's not looking good. And it turns out like that deal ended up being like one of the best deals, and it's about being honest, being transparent, working hard, creating more friends than enemies through business. All of those kinds of things, you keep going and it will work out. I'm a true believer of that. So, those are a couple of things that I've always kind of stuck to, going in this journey.
You talk a lot about your experience in traveling you took a couple of years, you went back to India for a few years, yeah?
Yeah. Yep.
And I know that was like a really critical time, like juncture in your life.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that played into the mindset that you currently have, because, you said, when has it not worked out? That is a really positive mindset, and it's really hard for most human beings to get there, right, on a consistent basis. So talk to me about that trip and how that has helped fuel your mindset currently.
Yeah. I won't talk about it in too much detail because, to be honest, it was one of those like spiritual things for me. So I don't want to mix the two sides of my life too much, where, like my career versus my spiritual. But I will say I was inspired to go there by someone who's been a part of like my family's life our whole life, and I want to say he's kind of like a spiritual figure that's guided us, and it's transcended into all aspects of my life. But really, those 2 years was a good step away from everyday life. I mean, it's crazy, right? Here we're so controlled by social media. We're so influenced, right? Every action we do, the way we think, the way we move. I mean, remember with Cam Newton, I'm a huge sports guy. So Cam Newton came out with the dab, right? And imagine in an isolated vacuum, you go to a different world and you just walk around and you start doing this. Like, people are gonna look at you like you're crazy, right? But no, it was the cool thing to do. I mean, it was so cool, right? Everybody's doing it. All these kids are doing it. I mean, we're seeing it all over social media, whatever, right? And so we're so influenced by these influencers or people on social media that tell us what is cool or what is normal, or like we all have these fades now, right? And I remember like Macklemore had this fade back in the day, and I was like, yo, this guy is crazy. Like, look at that hairdo, and then 4 or 5 years later, everyone's got a fade. Like, if you don't have a fade, you didn't get a haircut, right? So that was a great, step away from from that, and it made me really think about who I am, who I wanted to be, what was important in my life, what was quote unquote cool to me, who did I want to be? And again, all of this, I attribute to kind of like, the spiritual giant in my life. But yeah, so that's what those 2 years really did for me, is it allowed me to understand who I am, allowed me to, create this, like a different type of outlook on life. And I'm definitely applying it to every aspect of my life, including my career. So I think it was a beautiful thing, those 2 years. So
I love it, man. I love it. And you came back, you were in a different space, obviously. And that's when you decided to get into hotels.
Yeah, correct? That's when I decided that I didn't want to pursue the medicine route. And I wanted to make a shift and go more into business, entrepreneurial route. I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know what it would be, but made that pivot. And I think the other thing in that moment that was huge for me is, I talked to my dad, and I felt like I was smart, in a sense where I could find a job or figure something out. And I remember at that time, my father, he had told me that you're not going to get a job because you decided that you want to be an entrepreneur. And if you get a job, you'll get comfortable. And if you're comfortable, then you won't bust your butt. So I remember like a couple of my best friends from college, they'd be going on trips. They'd be, whatever, doing X, Y, and Z. And, they call me like, hey, we're going to Vegas this weekend. You want to come? And I couldn't, because I didn't have my life together. I wasn't making anything, I couldn't do it. I was living at home. I was dependent at whatever, 24, however old I was at that age. And I had to figure it out. And that pressure every single day brings out the best in you. It's like the fourth quarter game, right? So when it's fourth quarter, you got to figure it out, and backs against the wall. So that kind of stuff, I think really catapulted my journey and pushed me a lot. And again, grateful to the people in my life that pushed me to make those decisions and maybe not get a 9-to-5 job and be comfortable, be content, and never, because it's difficult, right? I mean, you're getting in the hotel space. It's difficult to be able to do this, after 5 p.m. or after 6 p.m. when you have your other household duties to take care of, and people aren't going to pick up your phone. How are you gonna talk to brokers at 8 p.m.? It's just not practical, not feasible. So, I think that really pushed me a lot as well.
There's so many opportunity vehicles out there, though, and so of all the different things that you could have done, what drew you to hotels?
Yeah. Again, one of them was, just having that family tie to hotels. So that definitely pushed me. But then even after I did that, I could have done multifamily. It could have done, we looked at like retail strip centers, that kind of stuff. We looked at all those things, but again, those are passive. I really felt like they were passive investments at the time. And the thing about hotels is, the beautiful thing about hotels is there's so many expense lines, right? You look at a P&L and you'll see 50 expense lines. Well, when you see 50 expense lines, a lot of people are like, oh man, this is a huge risk. There's so many expenses, so many variables. Well, I see it as, well, there's so many variables where I can tweak just 1 or 2 of them or 5 of them. And all of a sudden that goes straight to the bottom line. And so that's what I truly love. I love, taking a look at the P&L, the expenses, and increasing efficiency of operation. That's, and that in turn helps the beautiful thing about hotels, which is, it's real estate plus a business. It's cash flow plus over time, it's the value of it is appreciating. You're paying down your mortgage. You can refinance in 5-7 years, pull out your capital. Now all of a sudden it's a free asset. And on top of that, you're making money every single year, cash on cash return. And then the tax benefits, huge, right? So you have all these things that you can utilize and avenues, and you can strategize. And even when the economy gets tough or times are tough, you can pivot a little bit and tighten different screws to make your asset work for you. So though people will say it's a very risky asset class, I think of it as, if you know what you're doing, or you've done your homework, or you trust yourself, or you're willing to work hard, you just mitigated that risk completely. And so now, what's a risky asset class for everyone else, therefore it offers great returns, now all of a sudden it's a great asset class for me with minimum risk and great returns, right? So that's the way I think about it.
So when I'm hearing you say all of this, the first thing that comes to mind is, this is a guy with clearly a lot of business acumen and a lot of knowledge when it comes to understanding how to create efficiencies within a business. And that's one of the unique things about hotels, right? Is that it's part real estate, part business. And that's one of the only asset classes that I can think of in the real estate space where there's like a heavy business component attached to it. And so coming into the hotel space, though, it doesn't sound like you had a ton of business experience leading up to it. I know that you had the drug rehab, but talk to me about that transition and that like learning curve, and what got you through that and up and over, and now to the point where you're a badass business operator.
Yeah, no, I mean, you learn as you go, right? You're never gonna 100% know everything, but you have to kind of jump into the pool. And so, one of the things was, when you get an asset, or we talked a little bit about the Airbnb side, right? So when you have one or two Airbnbs and you understand small portions of the business, now all of a sudden you can take those skills and apply it to something else. And there may be a few different dynamics, like we talked about extended stay versus limited stay, and there's these different types of hotels. Now, if you go in a limited service hotel versus an extended stay hotel, the amount of employees in each department may change, the strategy may change. And so when I bought my first extended stay hotel, I didn't know what it was to manage an extended stay hotel, but again, a lot of those things, it just kind of transition over, and you kind of learn as you go. As you operate it for 60 days, 90 days, you keep the operation that's in place. You've underwrote for that already. And then as you begin to learn and you're around it, and you think analytically, you can kind of see, okay, I can tweak this, or I see a lot of overage on labor in this, this area, or, we're offering these things for breakfast, but I can offer these things which taste better and it's more cost effective for us, so you can make those sort of changes as you go. So, and then the other thing that wasn't so big when I started in the space, these masterminds and classes and all of that kind of stuff, right? So, definitely suggest, joining those, those kinds of courses that help accelerate that learning process. And, even if you can accelerate 6 months of knowledge on how to manage or operate those things. I mean, 6 months, let's say you save 10% on your revenue, and your revenue is maybe $200K in those summer months. Oh, you've already paid for the mastermind back over, and just with one property, so it will truly accelerate those things, which I didn't have those masterminds, but again, I had family that was in the space that I could learn from. I call them my board of advisors, or life advisors essentially, but I could always lean on them, and we bounce ideas off of each other all the time, even though we have two different firms. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. Like, access to knowledge, especially if they've been in the weeds for some time. Yeah, someone who has that track record is critical. Hey, I know that you're probably not going to shamelessly self-promote here, so I'm going to force it out of you. I know that you're running your own mastermind right now, right?
Yeah.
So you're running your own masterclass. Why don't you tell the people how they can find that? if they're
Yeah, I
interested?
mean, again, I haven't been huge on the social media space, just kind of, entering it. And, we just launched a 6-week course on, how to become a hotel investor. And it's a 6-week course. And I actually, on this one, we partnered with, one of my good friends, Davon. But yeah, so, reach out to me on Instagram, Sujay Mehta, SUJMEHTA. Just DM me on Instagram and, we can get over the details. And yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to get into the space and also, further give back just as people have done to me, and help accelerate that learning curve for people who are trying to get into the space. Because, the more we blow the space up, the better it is for all of us who already own assets as well. So it's, it's a win-win situation. And I'm looking forward to it. So if anyone's interested or just interested in learning more about it, feel free to, follow on Instagram and just DM me, and would love to have a conversation as well. So I appreciate that. Man. I appreciate that.
Of course.
The bump set.
Had to bump it, man. Had to bump it. Hey, so question for you when it comes to, because obviously you're working with a lot of people now who are getting into this space, they're getting their feet wet. What is a piece of advice that you'd have for, so let's look at two different avatars here. Let's look at someone who's who's a working professional. They've been maybe working in their day job for, 5, 10, 15 years, and they're trying to break free from the matrix, but they don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone that is looking to get started in hotel investing that fits that avatar? And then we'll go into the second avatar, but that would be the first one.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So people who are looking as a passive income stream, right? They already have a great job, a stable life, a 9-to-5 or, whatever it may be. But they have a very stable and structured life already. They're not looking to pivot and change careers. But they're looking to grow their passive income stream. I think hotels are a great investment, for those kinds of investors. And what I would say is to find a sponsor that you truly trust. That's the number one thing is, you want to have a sponsor that's going to be transparent, that's going to be honest through thick and thin. At the end of the day, all investments come with a risk. And if you can't find a sponsor that tells you that and explains the risk to you first, it may not be the best investment, but I would say look for an investor or look for a sponsor who's transparent and honest, one. And then two, just because you found that sponsor doesn't mean you automatically blindly go on every deal with them. Look at the deal, look at what they're offering, do a little bit of, market research, even if you're not in the industry. Take a look at, what the plan is, the business plan. If it makes sense to you, it might be a good deal. And then go from there. And again, one of the beautiful things about being an investor in the hotel industry is the cash flow, right? You don't have to necessarily invest your money and wait 5-7 years until value add, renovation, refinance, or sell the property as you would in multifamily or some of these other asset classes. But here you have steady cash flow coming in every year, and as we continue to grow the business or continue down the business plan, that cash flow increases over time. And then the other thing is the tax benefits are truly amazing in the hotel industry because we can do something what's called a cost segregation study, which you can do on other asset classes as well. But that accelerated depreciation that you get in hotels because of the furniture component of hotels is a lot larger than what you may see in other asset classes. And so again, number one thing I would say is the sponsor. Number one, could be a great deal, but if the sponsor's not willing to work, not willing to put in the time, the energy, the effort, it might not work. And then number two thing, take a look at the deal. Even if once you've vetted the sponsor, take a look at the deal, make sure the deal makes sense, make sure the numbers make sense, and then see if you can get in. See what the minimum is. And see if you can get into something like that. Try it out. Get your feet wet. Once you like it, you can definitely, continue to grow and roll over those the profits into 2 income streams or 3 income streams or whatever, and go from there. So that would be my advice for somebody who's watching this, who's, has a 9 to 5. I mean, definitely important to create multiple streams of income, especially in the world that we live in now. So I think that's an excellent opportunity to invest in hotels.
Not to get too far off track, but speaking to that working professional, that same avatar, you kind of hit on, you hit on a subject that I'm curious, and I think that those people would be curious as well about, which is a lot of these syndications, because as far as I'm aware, you are still running all of these as a syndication. You don't have like a private equity fund set up yet for
No, we don't. And again, I sometimes I do them as syndication, sometimes I don't. Sometimes we'll just have friends and family, and we'll just keep it all in house and finish it up like that. So we kind of depends on the deal, depends on what's going on for us, and how many projects we have going on as well.
Got it. So sometimes friends and family, sometimes syndications. Yeah. That being said, they're all structured fairly similarly, GPLP, that sort of thing. There are lots of working professionals that choose to invest their money into these types of investment vehicles because some of them structure, so maybe you could speak to this a little bit more in the hotel space specifically, but structure the deal in a way where the LPs receive an unfair share, right? Like an unequal share of depreciation benefits to offset their income, which is a super ninja tax strategy that you probably know a lot about, and would love for you to share the knowledge that you have about that.
Yeah. So the way we do it, and it might be different from a lot of other sponsors, is we oftentimes we give even shares back to our investors, and then we'll have some sort of fees to for putting the deal together and that kind of stuff, right? Depending on if it's a development, acquisition, what it may be. But we definitely pass back those even depreciation to our investors. And so the beautiful thing about that is, if you have a gain from another, and obviously I'm not a CPA, so definitely get with your CPA and fact check all this stuff and see how it fits for you personally. But for us, when we have an asset like this that we've invested in, because we're also investors, so I also invest in other hotel deals, including my own. And when we get that depreciation, we can write off a gain that we have from another passive income stream. So if I've invested somewhere else and I have a gain of, let's say, $10, and I got $10 of depreciation from this asset, I now can write off that gain, and I don't have to pay any taxes on it, right? So that's and again, it's a deferment of taxes. It doesn't mean I never have to pay taxes. When we sell the property, those all that depreciation that we took kind of catches up. But then at that point, there's other tax strategies that we would use, like a 1031 exchange or, whatever, to try to further defer that tax. But eventually, one day it could catch up to you. And so we're not evading it or anything like that, but it's a deferral. So
when you're talking, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to that second avatar, which would be, maybe they're younger, or maybe they just are a little bit less experienced, but someone who has a lot of time on their hands currently, but not a lot of capital.
Right.
How would you suggest, or what would the advice be to someone who fits that mold?
Yeah, I mean, so again, with hotels, I mean, it's definitely you definitely need capital to get into the larger hotels that we deal with, right? But with that being said, I mean, there always is this syndication model where we say, OPM, right? Other people's money. But get investors together and create a fund. And it could be a fund to go buy assets, or it could be a fund to buy a specific asset. And again, something that you'd have to talk to an attorney about, an SEC attorney, and kind of how to structure this. But structure a deal, and you can definitely have investors and syndicate a hotel deal. But with that being said, just because you have a lot of time doesn't mean you can become a sponsor, right? Because now all of a sudden you're asking people to invest in you. You're asking people to invest in your knowledge, your effort, your dedication, and all of that. And so when you're doing that, I urge that anyone who's trying to get into the business, please understand the business, do a little bit of research, use the different avenues that you have, whether it's a mastermind or going and working for a little bit and getting a job in the hotel space or whatever it may be, right? Partnering with someone who may understand the hotel space and understand the business, and then go out and you can raise your capital and go buy a deal if needed. And maybe on your first deal, it may be harder to convince someone to invest with you because you don't have that track record. But maybe for that kind of deal, you give back, right? And maybe start small, right? Maybe start with an Airbnb or a different type of short-term rental, or a duplex, a quad, a boutique hotel, and then scale larger if you have to, right? So that would be my advice to someone who's looking to just get started. But number one thing is make sure it's something that you love, something that you can become passionate about, and expose yourself to the space as much as possible. Surround yourself with people who are in the industry and can start building that network, and opportunities will come to you naturally when you're surrounded by those people. So
yeah, and it's funny that you say get a job in the hotel industry, because Devon, right, she worked in the hotel industry for a long time, and so there's so many different angles, avenues that you could basically find your way into the same sphere, for the same path. There's so many different paths here, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be different for every person, right? Depending on what they have available to them, what situation they're in, where they're at, even what market they're in. All those things affect how we do things, right? And so it's hard for me to sit here and say that person A, needs to do this, which would be the same journey as person B, right? And so depending on what their background is and on what they know, I mean, the path could be completely different. But it's important to, again, take a step back and think about what the goal is, where you want to go, and then create a path that tells you, it's like Google Maps. We have all these different routes, but we have to understand what the destination is before we pick a route. And we need to understand, is it time? Is it mileage? What are we trying to optimize? Is it tolls? Are we willing to pay the tolls to go the fastest and shortest way? Or are we trying to go around that and, have more time and more miles? Are we low on gas? Do we need to, optimize? Whatever. You get the analogy. I don't need to go into it too much, but yeah, it's the same thing, right? So again, we need to know what the destination is. We need to know what the goal is, and not just, again, this affects our life, right? So not just in our career, but also our life. Like, what is our life goal? If our life goal is, I don't want any calls after 5 p.m. I want to clock out, be done. Might not be the business for you, or a 24/7 business. And eventually you can build a team where you don't have to deal with all the fires, and you have people. But as a sponsor who's invested in their deals and committed to doing the most, I know that me getting involved is going to help achieve the best outcome. And so typically I will keep tabs on what's going on, even if I'm not directly making all the calls. So it might not be the business for you, but it might be. So we have to understand what our goal is and go from there.
So speaking of kind of getting into it and just going back to how you got started with all of this, very untraditional way. Most people start with an acquisition. You went the development route.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to do that?
Again, part of it was my folly and love of philosophy. I think is again, I talked about and it's funny because our like mission statement or whatever is it's from a seed of imagination to a real estate reality, right? And so that was the whole thing, is close your eyes and you just envision something and make it a reality. You could do anything that you put your mind to, and that was huge for me. And it was that folly of being in love with a thought like that was like, I'm gonna do development first. Like, who said I can't do it? Who's gonna tell me that I cannot do that, right? And so I was like, I'm gonna do development, and that was a pain. It was a pain in the butt to do a development first. Highly, highly, highly recommend doing an acquisition first, understanding the industry. And once you do that, then it's going to be easier to do a development because you understand the efficiency of doing, certain types of construction, certain types of development. Do we want a bigger pool, smaller pool? Do we want a bigger back of the office area? Do we need, for this brand, do we need a larger manager office? Do we need a sales manager office and a manager office? All of those things matter when you're in development and construction and landscaping. How does landscaping affect your business? Does it not? I don't know. Do people pay more because they see 10 bushes? I don't know. Well, if you've managed a property, an asset, and you understand, how that looks to a guest, or, what is too much or what is too little, then all of a sudden it's easier for you to, push that kind of design. So, again, I highly recommend doing an acquisition first, not a development. And the other thing about development is it does take about 18 months. And so for those 18 months, you're not cash flowing, you're not revenue positive. And so if you have something that is supporting you while you're doing that, then it becomes a lot easier, right? And a lot less stressful.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I'd say that's you did it the hard way.
Yeah. But once I did that, nothing really scared me. So
yeah, I could imagine. So last couple questions here for you.
Yep.
The first one being, you're on this journey right now, and obviously you've already amassed a massive portfolio, but there's still challenges. Right?
Yeah.
There's still challenges. And so I'm curious, what is the biggest challenge that you're currently facing?
Yeah. So before we got on this call, I have a property that, we're trying to find a GM for. And so, once I have my GMs, for me and my operation, the way I've structured it, once I have my GMs in place, we're kind of good. And so, I have this asset that, we're looking for a GM for, had someone that I reached out to, and, they were supposed to come in and manage. And we waited a month. We didn't have any posting because, I knew her and I trusted her to come through, and she said she was good. So that's all I needed. And, she was supposed to start on last Monday. And on Friday, I get a text or an email that says, I can't make it. And so, that hurt. But more than that, it put a little bit of pressure on, okay, we need somebody here. This is a large asset. We've had a month of vacancy waiting for this person because she was worth it. But now, bygones be bygones, like that's not happening, right? So we need to move on. And so, staffing is definitely one of the tougher things to deal with in operation. Finding good people and keeping them. I think it's getting better than it was a year, 2 years ago. But that's something that, any time if we did this call again next week, it would probably be a different problem that I would say is my biggest challenge. But that, and then again, I'm still in the development, on the development side, and we're doing a couple renovations. And so working with GCs is always another difficulty for me, and making sure that they're on their timeline and they're moving according to the plan. So that's another tough part of the business. But again, if you stick to acquisitions and just that operations part, I think that the staff, and if you have a good staff, then you're golden. And you should also appreciate the staff for that. And so, making sure that you're treating them like they would want to be treated, I think is a key element to having a solid operation at your property.
Considering the number of property, how many properties exactly do you own?
So we have about 11 under management right now, assets under management, and then 2 more that we're developing. And then, a couple that we have LOIs out on and, we're looking to acquire, but we'll see how those things kind of work out.
So with that many, so one would assume, right, as an investor, is like, hey, once I get to a certain point, 5 hotels, 8 hotels, 10 hotels, maybe it gets a little bit easier. Maybe I don't have to be in the weeds. But what I'm hearing you say is that despite having a double-digit portfolio of hotels, you're still very much in the thick of it. Like, you're still involved in these sort of like day-to-day problem-solving mode. Yeah,
and again, right? I choose to. That's why, right? I mean, you definitely have, when you go from 1 to 2 and 2 to 4, it definitely does become easier in the sense that you have a choice, you have an option, because if one goes down, 5%, 10%, it's okay because you're supported by your portfolio. Now all of a sudden you can leverage all the properties, you can leverage staff, that kind of stuff, right? So it definitely does become easier. But again, it comes down to, for me, it's sometimes I choose to be involved in those quote unquote smaller decisions and smaller issues, because I know that, I can be very efficient when it comes to making those decisions, and I can help guide. And so sometimes I will be involved, and it's a choice, but because of that involvement, I do believe that I see, 5 to 10% better, bottom line percentage points than maybe my counterparts who choose not to do that, right? And so anytime, like, imagine, like, if you have a family and you can't hire a proxy father and think that it's going to be the same as, raising your kids on your own, or if there's a teacher, they just because now all of a sudden they can manage 3 classrooms, you can't just hire proxy 3 teachers and be completely, removed and think it's just, they're going to teach the class just fine, whatever it is, right? Like, anytime you have a proxy, it doesn't always mean that it's going to be just as good or better. It depends on if you have the right people in place. But it's, as of now, I choose to be a little bit more involved in the operations side. We are trying out, a third-party management company to see if maybe that's a route that we want to do to move all the operations to third-party management. But so far, I'm feeling that I could probably do it a lot better. And so, we're going to start building out that a little bit more in-house rather than, contracting out to third parties. So again, but, there's 100 third-party management companies and we might just not have had the right one. So kind of just depends.
So you make it all sound so easy. We all know that knowing what I know that it's not. And I think a lot of the listeners are also going to have that awareness. But, just as an observation, to me, it sounds like the way that you got to where you're at right now as quickly as you did is because you chose to stay in the weeds for as long as you did, right? Because I don't know that you would have experienced the growth, and I don't know that your investors would have experienced the returns that they experienced had you not done that.
Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah,
that's cool, man.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just like a massive kudos to you.
No, so I appreciate that, but again, it's when you treat something like it's your baby and you're passionate about it, and it's honestly it's the same problems over and over. It's rinse and repeat. Or once you've dealt with it once, it's really easy to give that guidance and just say, hey, this is what we need to do. Call these people, ask them this, negotiate to this. This is how much it should be, and boom, just let's get it done, right? So. And then a lot of it is like strategizing, right? Like when I start seeing pick up on certain things, being able to be involved and let your people know that, hey, these are the pivots that we need to make. We need to adjust rates. We need to adjust prices. X, Y, and Z is staff, labor, all that kind of stuff. So, it's a lot of that. And it's fun for me. Again, Like I feel like I'm a problem solver. When I see a problem, like, let's figure it out. It's one of my favorite games to play is Catan. You have 4 resources or 3 resources, just don't go together. You got to make a move. What can you do? And it's being able to think and say, okay, I know this person has this person has this. How can we all create a win-win-win situation and continue moving forward, right? So
that's awesome. I love it, man. Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time and for giving the listeners something to think about, right? Because you're right. This isn't something that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah.
The hotel space. And it's so funny because like it seemed so inaccessible until maybe like, I don't know, like less than 12 months ago. I feel like there's been a surge now in people talking about it. So that is, I think this bodes well for like the future of the hospitality space, because the more accessible it becomes, my feeling is that the better the consumer experience is going to get.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's, I mean, if not now, then later, right? So someone's going to start talking about it eventually. And, until they do, I think it's up to us to make sure that there's awareness that, these hotels are something that we can own, we can buy. And I think it's an awesome thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's done great things for me. And, we're always taking, investors. We're happy to help guide at that kind of stuff. So, it's a win-win-win for all of us. And I think it's fun. So
in traditional gold mine fashion, the last question is always, what is one golden nugget that the viewers back at home, the listeners back at home, that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I think for me, like, again, I come from a background, there was a time where I thought about doing MBA, and, a lot of people asked me, what my credentials were. And you asked me about being younger, and, I'd go to these bank meetings, and sometimes, people would dismiss me because I was, 24-year-old kid trying to get into the, ask for a multi-million-dollar loan, right? And so it just, and the times were different than they are now. But, I think the biggest thing, and something that we share, I know, is our love for Kobe. And I talk about this all the time, but like the Mamba mentality is like, just go do it, like, don't be afraid. It's okay. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay, to have all these feelings, but just to digest it and just go, just go for it. And don't be afraid of what's going to happen. Don't shut those doors on yourself, but be intentional, create a plan, and then start moving on the plan. It's one step after the other. You don't climb a mountain by going straight to the top. It's literally one step. It's 6 inches at a time. That's how you get on the top of the mountain. And so, I'm on my journey to get there. I'm not saying I've gotten there, so I'm no persona that's saying all this stuff. But again, I'm on my journey, and what I would say has been working for me is like 6 inches at a time. Like, let's just, move together as well and continue to help people along the way and give back. And yeah, so that's my golden nugget, one step at a time.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time, Suj. For the listeners back at home, you mentioned, investment opportunities. You mentioned, obviously, you've got your course for people that are interested more on like the active investing side of things.
Yeah.
You gave your Instagram. Is there any other way that they can get, should they all DM you? Like, what's the way that they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can all DM me. It's all good. That's the best way. We have a website and stuff, but the best way is, just through social media. Like, one of the beautiful things about social media is being able to connect to people. I still want to maintain that human touch. So DM, we'll talk, we'll get to know each other and see what works, and then we'll go from there. So
love it. And I can personally attest that Suj is very responsive on Instagram. You get a lot of these like people that, they like never message you back. This dude messaged you back like in a heartbeat, dude. It's crazy.
No, I'm not big time yet. So hit me up. I'm excited.
Love it, man. Well, Suj, thanks so much for your time, and thanks for hopping on here, man. And learned a lot from you. I love the learn as you go. You know, I think that's an amazing nugget that hopefully a lot of the listeners out there will take to heart. So appreciate you, brother.
And thanks for having me on. And it was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, man. Cool.